Welcome to Permission to Kick Ass, a podcast about leaving self-doubt in the dust, punching fear in the face, and taking bold action toward your biggest dreams. I'm Angie Coley, and let's get to it. Hey, and welcome back to Permission to Kick Ass. With me today is Heather, quote-unquote Heather Campbell. That's an inside joke from Eat, Play, Launched in Las Vegas. You had to be there, but I promise it's hilarious. Hi, Heather. Say hi.
Hi, Angie. How are you doing today? I'm so happy to be here.
I'm so happy to have you here too. I mean, we just spent like 20 minutes laughing and giggling and telling stories and going, oh shit, we got to record. So I know this show is going to be amazing and full of high energy, and I'm so excited. All right. So tell us a little bit about your business and what you do.
Oh, so my business, I am a branding and digital marketing strategist, which is just a very fancy syllabic. Lots of syllables to describe words and pictures, but I put them together very, very well and very strategically. And so I've had my own business since 2014. I actually just turned 8.
Oh.
So I'd be a third grader if I was a human being, which I'm super excited about because I really found my voice as a consultant. And then once I was a few years into my business and I had the opportunity to work with a variety of different clients, as opposed to running branding and marketing for the same, a big company, same business where everyone's like working together to advance that business, I started to realize that companies, anytime they were getting hung up or stuck in their marketing, like they could be big, like they could seriously be like a multi-billion-dollar real estate company or an entrepreneur just starting out. Wherever they were getting stuck in their marketing, I was like, oh, they're just missing this one step in the process. And so there's something that professional marketers, and you'll know this because you're in the creative world, is that there is an order to marketing operations. And a marketing professional would never, ever, ever think of skipping over any of the steps because they're all so foundational and they all build on each other. And I thought, that's so interesting because I had a pretty formalized process having worked, having had my business in place for like 2 or 3 years at that time. And I thought, maybe I should start working with entrepreneurs and creating an online course for them. Then I sat on that and meditated on it for like 2 years because even as a professional, I was so nervous to take that step out there. It's such tender work,
Yes.
So oh my gosh. So if somebody I bet you're the same way. If somebody calls and asks me for my opinion, oh, hell yes, I am going to give it. But when no one's asking and you're putting yourself out there just saying, hey, everyone, I'm open for business. And this is how I think you should do branding and marketing. No one's asking. It completely changes things. So I sat on the sidelines for 2 years and that nudge in the back of my shoulder just saying, do this, you can help people. This is like your purpose. Like I would sit there and meditate and I would literally get these divine downloads saying, your mission is to help many, help many. Because I used to think I am not a healer. Like I am not an angel card reader. I'm not a psychic. I am a marketing person whose sole job is to get someone to think positively about a company so they either buy the product, work at the product, or like buy there, work there, or invest in it, right? Like that is my whole mission in life. And I just thought, gosh, how is this a noble profession? But I think it's entirely noble. So then about 2 years later, I started to get my constructs together. And 2 years after that, I launched my first online course.
Yay!
So I know. So it took 4 years from probably even more because I remember having the idea, wow, if people only knew what I knew about marketing and then, and brand and really branding too, which is something that is a lot of entrepreneurs think I'm not brand. I'm just a single person, but they're looking at brand in not in a wrong way, but just in a way that you would sort of feel or see it if you didn't do this for your entire career.
Oh yeah.
You wouldn't know.
I've told the companies that I've consulted with, you're creating a brand, whether you're doing it intentionally or not. You might as well be intentional.
Yeah. And like, it's happening with or without you, my friend. And it's so much better when it happens with you.
Absolutely.
It's way more exciting too. Like that's how, especially for an entrepreneur, right? A big company is going to maybe sometimes get it a little bit more. But an entrepreneur, especially, it empowers you in such, I get so geeky about it. in Ohio visiting my family for a long time, a few months ago, and people would say, what do you do? And I'm like, oh, I'm branding and marketing. But then I have these online courses for entrepreneurs. And they'd be like, wow, you are like super passionate about this. And I'm like, I am, because what I love about branding is that it absolutely allows you to get like a 2 feet on the ground. I know who I am. I know how I show up, and I know where I'm going, and it informs everything and just makes everything easier for everyone, mainly the entrepreneur.
Exactly.
Because you don't have to guess, like, who am I today? How should I show up? You know, all that angst.
And well, I mean, I think that's a great point too, because how you show up on a day-to-day basis changes. I was telling you right before we started talking that this morning at this place that I'm staying at, somebody pulled the fire alarm at 2:00 in the morning for shits and giggles. I don't know why.
Right.
So I'm running on fumes today, and how I show up today is different from yesterday and different from tomorrow, just because of life, man. Life
Oh my
happens.
God. I just think divorced parents, the teenage kid is visiting his dad.
Probably. It's just somebody causing trouble for the hell of it. And it's fun. Like, I think I was naturally inclined toward branding because I just got it from my screenwriting training, interestingly enough. But it just made sense to me because how Dr. House talks about something and approaches a problem is so completely different from like Doogie Howser, from like, what was that? There was the Good Doctor. I know that he was on the autism spectrum, and it was like, so there's 3 doctors all in a show. How they speak is completely different. And when you picture them, if you're familiar with those characters, you instantly know, all right, House, bad tempered, going to beat you down.
Addicted to, what's he addicted to? Vicodin or something,
was.
Right? Yeah.
He was. So it was interesting. I want to, you said so many good things, and I feel like a pile of notes to get through, but I know that your journey to starting your own business was an interesting one, because I think in the entrepreneurial world, there's kind of this, like, you're called to it. And I don't think you were necessarily called to it so much as forced into it.
Yeah, pushed into it, maybe. Oh yeah, I love to share this story just because it has a very happy ending, but it is so interesting. So I think it's funny and interesting. And so I was your standard American burnt out executive. But the thing is with burning out is you don't know what's happening when it's happening, because as you move up in the ranks, everyone gets a little slightly more miserable, and everyone around you is like struggling and isn't really balancing their life. Like, they're not eating, they're not sleeping. It's like bragging rights to see whose vacation was ruined by work, and how you had to show up. And this is also like in the, mid 90s to early 2000s. So I hope my kids are 22 and 26, and there's a way more balance. Like, when I tell them, like, the hours I used to work when I started off working at an agency in Chicago, my daughter, who works at an agency, a PR agency, is like, why would you even do that? I'm like, because that's just how it was. And if you didn't do it, they were like, you would not. Yeah, at least that's what I thought, is I'm not going to move my way up. And so
there was that pressure from up top. Like, you're not a team player if you're not killing yourself for this role. How bad do you want it?
Yeah.
Not bad enough to die for it.
And then I'm from the Midwest, where your parents raise you like, you are lucky that anyone is even paying you to work. Like, you're lucky to even have a job. So you show up 15 minutes before your boss, you leave 15 minutes after. And I was definitely one of those people that did that, thinking, oh my gosh, this is going to be so great. But when your life gets so out of whack, and then when I had kids, like, it was just, they say, like, you can put a frog in water and turn the heat up, and it will just sit there until it boils to death. And that's what burning out is like. It's not like, if you threw me into a pot of hot water, right, that frog would jump right out. I would jump right out. That's not how it works. And I was also from a really big family, and there was a lot of fighting going on when I was growing up. So I got really good at fighting. So if anybody wanted to fight me at work, I was glad. I was a glad participant. And I would sometimes think like, I'm just giving them like a little like tap on the chin. And I wasn't. It felt to them, it was like I completely decimated them. So I was great at the work, and I was not great at the relationships at the last company I was working for. And so I got this call one day from my former boss, who lives in Florida. He was going to fly out to Denver to fire me. And you just know what that call sounds like, because he was like, oh, I'm going to be in Denver tomorrow, and I'd like to meet with you. And I'm like, Oh, you can just tell in the tone of their voice. I'm like, oh, do I need to prepare anything? And he's like, no. And I called my husband immediately and I'm like, I am going to get fired tomorrow.
Oh,
And he's like, how? Like you've been working, you work like 80, 90, 100-hour weeks. Like you travel all the time. Like you're doing all these things. Like how could that possibly be? Because I was not good at the relationships. And so my boss comes in to fire me. And it's really funny because I work in an industry and he had all women who worked for him. And so we were all like, we loved to hug him and he did not like to be hugged. And so when he came in, I just said, just to be clear, there shall be no hugging today since I'm getting fired from my job.
oh my
So
gosh.
as he was firing me, he said, would you be open to consulting for us? And I was like, yeah, I was like real sassy. And I'm like, yeah, like can I swear on this show? Can we swear?
Yeah,
I was
absolutely.
like, oh yeah, I fucking got fired from my job today. And so I had no idea what to do. I just remember being so embarrassed. That was probably one of my first feelings. And I knew that I did not have a good relationship with my job. So I knew trying to get another job was not going to be anything that I should be doing. At the same time, I was the breadwinner in my family. So me losing my income was a huge financial blow. And it's not like I was sitting on stockpiles of savings or anything like that. Like it was a really scary time. And so
Mhm.
I remember it felt like I was on a ledge of a high-rise building that was like 3 inches wide, where I was barely hanging on. And that if I took any action, if I tried to succeed or even fail, either way, I was going to fall off this building. Right. So it just felt really awful. And I remember just putting a shout out to the universe, like, and not even knowing what that really meant in any way, nothing about anything. And I was just like, please, universe, can I please get ledge? Like, I just need ledge. I just wanted a place where I could just get 2 feet on the ground. And
Mhm.
so I had put together these projects that I thought had a really good beginning, middle, and end. Whomever they hired to replace me, I could sort of pick it up and give it to them wholesale. It wasn't going to be messy with all these loose ends. We were going through a huge national branding initiative at that time too. And I really, really, really wanted to see that through. It was a really big project and, and a lot of time and energy put into it. And so I thought this is in July of 2014. So I'm like, if
Mhm.
I can just make enough money to cover our family trip to Costa Rica at the end of the year, I don't even care. Like I had no idea about anything about money, what I should be charging. So I put together these 4 projects and my former boss calls me and he's like, okay, these projects look great. And I said, good. And so he's like, so why don't we do this? Why don't we bring you on as a full-time consultant between now and the end of the year? And I'm like, all right, that's not what I would, but okay.
Mhm.
And he said, we'll pay you what you were making. And I'm like, all right. And he's like, and then you had to like buy a laptop and get your desk set up and you have Cobra insurance, which is so expensive. He's like, so why don't you just gross up everything by like 30%, 20, 15%. And I was like, oh, okay, that sounds good. And then something else that he did in the industry I was working in, you would get these massive bonuses at the end of the year that represented like 15% of your salary. And what he ended up doing was grossing up my percentage. So I got my full bonus payout.
Wow.
So I had so many people looking out for me at a time where I made it very difficult for people to look out for me. And
Yeah.
so then during that time, I got ledge, which was amazing. I had my income. I called my husband and I was laughing and he thought I was crying. He's like, how did it go? And I said, I just got like a 15% raise and I don't even have enough work to keep me busy for an honest 40 hours a week. So during that time, then I started working for them. And then I worked in a really tight knit industry. So people knew I left. They knew I started my own left, pushed it,
Mhm.
whatever, knocked off the top of the building. And so they were like, hey, we heard you had your own thing going on. Do you want to work together? And that was when I thought, you know what, I'm gonna give this a go. I really loved being able to work with different people. I loved being able to work for different companies and even different industries that I'd never worked in before. because branding is, universal. So it sort of doesn't matter what kind of company it is. You just need to understand the core components of the business and the competitive landscape. And so it was awesome. And the company that fired me ended up being my biggest client for the first 4 years of my business.
Wow. That's so
I know.
Incredible.
It is so incredible. I still can't believe that happened to me. But then again, my life is like a sitcom that way.
It's funny. My old screenwriting professor used to say that too. Like, don't be so focused on being a world builder. You don't have to make it up. The funniest shit is happening around you in real life right now. Just watch.
Oh yeah. I've seen entire Curb Your Enthusiasm episodes that I'm like, my husband's like, that actually happened to you. And I'm like, I know, it's so crazy. So Larry David, where are my royalties?
I know. Yes. No kidding.
Yeah.
I've seen, I heard so many good things in that, and I wanted to unpack a few of them because I thought it was so useful. I want to dig even deeper. So the first one that I thought was really cool was that you mentioned at the very beginning about like this reputation, and you weren't focused. You weren't good at the relationship part of it. And that was part of the reason why you wound up parting ways. And I think a lot of folks that are starting out in their business, they are almost paranoid to be bad at something, paranoid to make a mistake. It's all going to come crumbling down. And I just find it fascinating that like all of those things happened to you.
Yes.
And you still created a business and you still wound up succeeding. So like, I love that. I love it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
It took a little while and a lot of reflection. Because it didn't, like, the realization, like when I was like working, I was like, those assholes, it took me a while to really realize, like, it probably took me, I think, a full 3 years to even admit that I was fully burnt out. I don't know why that one was the hardest one. I guess because it just seems like you just don't have control. Yeah, exactly. Like I would say, oh, I was on the top of the burnout roller coaster hill. I was like, no, I had gone like
corkscrew spirals.
Like, yeah, exactly. I did work on a roller coaster in college that it was one of those turn you upside down, not once, not twice, but 3 times.
Oh, I love those. Yeah. Those are my favorite. I'm a bit of an adrenaline junkie, but I'm sure that's a big surprise, right?
Yeah.
But I love that too, because one of the things that I run into with a lot of my coaching students when we're working together is, I'll help them troubleshoot a client problem, like a communication issue. I'll help them position themselves to a new client with some confidence or something. And I've had people remark on like, how do you know this? I don't feel like I even understand how you approach this. And I was like, can we talk about how many times I fucked this up and did not actually do well and burned some bridges and offended some people? There are probably still many, many people out there that do not like me and they don't say good things about me, but I can't really do anything about that other than apologize and say, I've learned from that. Thank you for giving me the chance to learn. I'm going to go do better with the next person and the next person and the next person until here I am helping you with your issue,
Oh my gosh. I remember meeting a friend of mine who we used to work together. I actually hired her. She ended up becoming my creative director. And I gave her very first graphic design job. And she was just this really fantastic person. And she started her own business, her own agency about 18 months before me. So it was so interesting that like I was her boss, then she became my mentor. And I remember telling her, I said, there were ways that I treated people, even on my own team, where I would, and you don't know that you're doing this. Like, it's not like I set out to say, oh, I'm going to really make someone doubt their ability, or I'm going to really like make them feel like I would do these things where I would like set these completely unrealistic situations. And then when they didn't do it, I would sort of come in to save the day. Oh my gosh. It's just, I cringe. Like I literally get sick inside when I think about doing it. I understand exactly who that person was. Like I have changed a lot in these last 8 years, but I remember telling my friend Kim, who is like, again, about 18 months ahead of me, I just said, there are people who I legit have damaged. And I was a fighter and I'm a words person and I would use my words to wound. And sometimes I would even stand back and admire my work. Oh, I still am not out of that at all.
I've been there too. Yeah. Lots of therapy. And can I just say, I think it's really courageous to be talking vulnerably like this and saying, I wasn't always great at this. I hurt some people. I don't think that we talk openly enough about this kind of stuff that it's okay to make mistakes. Obviously, it's not okay to hurt people. But what you said, I thought tied in greatly to a discussion that I'm usually having with my clients about, okay, but give people grace for being human, because just like you said, odds are they didn't wake up today and think, how can I fuck up this person's day? I'd really like to make them feel like trash. It's just something that's going on with them and their perception of reality. It really doesn't have anything to do with you, even though it feels deeply personal. And if you can kind of get yourself away from that, it feels personal and it's really not, then you can start to see that person with compassion. And even if it doesn't work out, it doesn't linger as much as it would.
Right. Well, and I really think one of the biggest thing that has helped me too is forgiveness. And
Yes.
it's not even, it's like forgiving yourself. Like I had such a fear of not being the best. Like I had to be the best employee, the best mom, the best dress, the best decorate, the best, like everything. And so when I have that, but when you have that kind of energy, I call it like a proving energy. And really what it is I did not feel worthy for some reason, even though I had lots of different things that were like indicators of success, right? Like I would get promotions, I would get projects, I would get, I would be able to do these like crazy things, just little old me, getting these big projects over the finish line. And for whatever reason, I didn't allow myself to receive. I just kept on I remember when I got promoted to vice president at this big company of branding and marketing, my colleague who we ran the group together with, she's like, you are now an officer of this company. You can stop proving yourself. And I'm like, oh, I'll never stop proving myself. I remember thinking like, what is wrong with you? Of course, I'm going to keep on proving myself. And I realized that just comes from yourself not feeling worthy. And you just keep on taking on more. And it all makes, once I realized that, I was able to articulate, oh, I had a fear of not being the best. Oh my gosh. And the best is not perfect.
Oh yeah.
Perfection is not even the best. That doesn't mean that you're the best. It means you're just perfect. And so it's even, I think, more than perfectionism. Like it's more sinister that way.
It definitely can be if you don't find a way to step back and look at yourself like you did holistically. And I know that you and I met through our mutual friend, Dr. Julie,
yes,
who I've referenced several times on the show because she's been incredibly helpful to me.
I love that lady.
But this is the kind of stuff that we unpack with Dr. Julie, these internal narratives. And as I'm hearing you talk about this, like, yes, I think there's a little bit of a self-worth issue, and that stems from like background and personal stuff. And we struggle with that. I've had a lot of self-worth issues too. And then I think there's like the capitalist narrative that comes in on top of that, especially the 80s and 90s when it got super toxic. You owe your life to this job. You need to stay here and prove your worth and prove your loyalty. And maybe someday we'll give you a raise that actually helps you keep up with the cost of living.
Right, but you'll still make 28% less than men.
Yeah. No kidding. And not be taken seriously and have them steal your ideas. For those, don't at me, man. I have had dudes literally steal my ideas, and 2 weeks I pitch it. And it is like, it's a little bit risky. I don't think it's really well thought through. And 2 weeks later, a dude pitches the exact same thing, almost word for word. And it's forward thinking. And it's just the kind of fresh air we need around here to inject new life into this company. And I was like, do you hear yourselves? What is this?
Right.
Do I need to record meetings?
It is 100%. Yes, 100%. I used to work with this guy who I was a way better writer than he was. And he would turn something in and literally be like, this is the best goddamn thing I've ever written. And it was all right. Like, I mean, I was just like, boy, because I would edit his stuff all the time. And then I did that once that I was like, oh my gosh. And I turned it into my boss. I'm like, this is the best goddamn thing I've ever written. And I had to sit down. You cannot, that was so offensive that you said that. And I just thought, we live in such a conflicting time as women because the whole notion of women in the workplace is still, I mean, what is it, like 50 years after like 10,000 years? Like, I mean, in the whole spectrum of time, it's not that long. Yeah. And then, we have this conflicting message, reach out, lean in, claim it, be this amazing person. But the social narrative is from the time we're little kids is don't talk about yourself, don't brag, don't ask for any more than you need. And
be polite,
I see it show up all the time.
The
and oh my God, totally. You got to make everything okay. And I see it all the time happen, especially with female entrepreneurs, where they discount their pricing for no reason. Like they just discount their price because they're so nervous to really ask and claim their value. And I'm like, oh, society, like we're raised by our parents, but I think we're raised way more by the societal narrative, 100%.
Oh, for sure. And I had actually a similar story when I was still in corporate as a copywriter. I know that I worked really long hours, and I'm pretty sure I probably lost my temper in one of the meetings, but I also knew how to handle myself. So my temper looked like, can we get back to the points? Here's what we were discussing. Here was the decision we were trying to make. I think you have it
your cheeks get red.
Yeah, I start to get red. Of course, they don't get to see this video. So yes. You and I and the rosy cheeks. And so I said that, I brought it back to the point. I thought I was like decisively wrapping up the meeting. And then of course, my copy chief calls me into the office, like, could you close the door? Could you sit down, please? And thankfully, he was a fantastic human being, and he really cared about us as people and as team members. And so he sat me down and he was like, do you think your behavior was inappropriate there? And I said, can I ask you an honest question, Mark? Would you be having this conversation with me if I was a man? Ooh, and to his credit,
what did he say?
To his credit, he actually took a pause and he goes, wow, I don't actually know. And that's kind of bothering me. And I was like, it's kind of bothering me too. And I mean, I'm not mad at you or anything like that, but I'm kind of tired of if I go in there and I behave exactly like one of my male colleagues, I'm a bitch.
Yes.
And it is unacceptable for Angie to behave that way. But that guy over there who is coming in swinging his dick around gets to say whatever he wants. And he's, oh yeah, he's fighting for the company. Go him. Ugh.
Right. Oh my gosh. I once was hiring somebody, and I got this resume in from this guy who was just like completely like ideal. And his asking salary was $20,000 more than what I was making. And I told my boss was like, oh, are you going to interview this guy? And I said, I sort of was joking. We were at like a department head retreat. And I said, oh no, obviously not, because his salary ask is so much more than what I make. And she's like, you just are going to have to get comfortable with that you might have people working for you who make more than you do. And I'm just like, how does that even, I said, I don't even like, I was just like, like, I was like, how does that even compute? And she's like, well, I have people working for me who make more than I do. And she made so much money. She was in the company's 10K reporting. So I know exactly how much she made, over $800,000 a year. And I'm like, I don't think so. But I was just like, then you are a way better person than I am, or your earnings is like so much more than what I would ever make. I was like, I just can't, I just was surprised by that. I haven't thought about that in years.
I remember
advocating for myself, and it did not go well. And I did not interview that guy because I'm like, I'm not going to be able to. I said, you're going to pay somebody junior to me and pay that guy $20,000 more than you pay me when I've done X, Y, and Z, and I've actually demonstrated my value for the company. Like, are you crazy?
Yeah, I don't like it. I think I have hope for the future generations, especially seeing on TikTok of all places, where Gen Z is talking about like respect. And again, before you at me, like listen to what people are actually saying and sit with it if it makes you uncomfortable instead of arguing. I challenge myself to do this like all the time. And I am surprised sometimes how the learning sneaks in when you are open instead of shutting things down. But I agree with Gen Z that I don't owe my life to a business, especially not a business who is going to cut me in a heartbeat if things get tough, and they don't have any loyalty to me. So why do I have loyalty to them? And then the thing that you brought up, I thought was crucial too, that ties back to our narrative work with Dr. Julie. Relationships are in trouble the moment resentment starts to creep in.
Oh, resentment is the worst. That is the worst emotion. I swear it is. It's worse than anything, because then that is resentment. I swear to gosh, is what makes the Grinch's heart like 3 times too small.
Yes.
It's like that just shrivels up your heart into a little black nugget, because when you're thinking of resentment, and it just is like a magnet, because you just start to see like all the injustice. And I really focus on not being in resentful. Like, I'm a really optimistic person, and not like jumping over like glitter hurdles all the time. Like, I'm a realist as well, but I tend to I look for the good in situations. And even like getting fired, or even like in that, like I don't think, like, when people say, oh, everything happens for a reason, I'm like, I don't know about that, but I do think that everything happens for meaning. And when I'm able to find meaning in what's happening, then there's purpose in it. And once I'm able to get to that meaning place, I just have, like, don't they say, like, when you're meditating, like, the best place to be is in the role of the observer? It's like, now I'm out of it, because now I'm searching for the meaning, and I'm pulling myself above it, to, like, figuratively and sometimes literally, to really take a look at it, to say, okay, where's the meaning in this?
Yes.
Like, really, this is happening. This is happening. I'm a human being on earth, here for an experience. So where can I find that meaning in it? And it really does. It changes things significantly. And then you set your brain to start. You can't ask a question and your brain not answer it.
Yeah.
Like, so if you're like, those people are assholes, I'm going to go down that path. I'm going to keep on going down that path, the asshole lane, where you're just like, and then that's absolutely going to change the way that you look at other people and other situations, where I'm like, where's the meaning in this? I'm helping my brain to sort of to say, where is this? Like, I just had this conversation with one of my students the other day, that she was saying, the challenge is this. And I said, can we change the word challenge for the question is this? And I'm really curious, because then she was trying to figure out, like, how can I find time to write and to paint? And I'm like, could we maybe say the question is how I want to do these two things? How can I make them happen where I feel like I'm not sacrificing one or the other? Like, I have to pick between my two loves.
I love
and I'm
that.
like, and then I love to ask the question, like, I'm so curious to see how this plays out, because then you're now in the realm of possibility. And if you're, I'm not saying like it's that easy all the time, but sometimes, like, it can be a big situation, and you can be like, I am so fucking curious to figure out, like, how is this going to play out? Like, sometimes you have that kind of edgy energy in there, because it is a big thing. There's a lot riding on it. But I find when I ask that question, you get the best answers, and they're oftentimes unexpected, and they come at a weird time. Like, when you're like, how people get ideas in the shower, that is when they come, because you're not thinking so hard about trying to force a solution. You've asked the question, let it go. I get mine when I brush my teeth.
And then take space. We don't take space often enough in this instant communication world. Feels like you have to answer right away.
Exactly.
24 to 48 hours is totally acceptable. And anybody that loses their mind and goes, it's 48 hours and you haven't responded to me, they might have some of their own issues that they're dealing with. But I love that you said that, because I think it reframes the story on a couple of different levels. Because I know one of the challenges I've had in working with a lot of freelancers who are they're evolving into starting a business from the freelance model. There are many, many wonderful freelance support groups, and they are called echo chambers for a reason. And that is the home of the pitchfork mob. And the conversation when they go to their support groups usually looks like something like this. Well, my client did this, this, and this, and it kind of bothered me. Is that a red flag? Are they trying to screw me over? And I always tell them that's the wrong question, just like you said,
right.
Because everybody who's ever been burned by a client, whether it was their fault or the client's, is going to come out of the woodworks and tell you, they're the devil, run away, they're trying to screw you over. And then someone like me, who's a little bit contrarian by nature, comes in and goes, is there a possibility that there might have been a miscommunication? So from a hiring standpoint, I could see how if this happened, then this was my reaction. And then that was your reaction. So like, this could have gone off the rail through a totally innocent mistake and have nothing to do with how they think of you as a person.
Oh my gosh, that is so true. Like about 8 years ago, one of my brothers died, and my sister and I were driving to his funeral, and her gas gauge was broken on her car. So she would track the miles. But we were in this extraordinary situation. So she lost track of like her mileage, and we're driving to the funeral and we are literally running out of gas. And we are driving, she's driving like a maniac, like, because we don't want to run out of gas. And we're in this part of town that we're not really familiar with. And so we can see a gas station and we're just like, oh my, like it, I don't even know how we ended up getting, like, I remember seeing the funeral home about a half mile down the road. And I thought, well, at least if we run out of gas, we can at least walk there. And so we were doing not nice driving things. Like we were running like stop signs and things like that, because we didn't even want to stop because we were so afraid we were going to run out of gas. And I remember thinking, and people were just like honking and yelling at us. And I just wanted to say, oh my God, our brother just died. You know, like we're trying, here's what's going on in our lives. Because I think anyone would be like, oh my gosh, you go like ahead of me. Right. Yeah. And so it was such an interesting lesson to me, because I thought, oh my gosh, like, what if that person who is driving erratically on the road is going to like an emergency room because their child was in a car accident or something like that? Like you have no idea what anyone is going through at any given time or what they have going on in their life. And so many people, like I have amazing coping skills growing up in a really complex family that sometimes I don't even know, is it really me, or is this me genuinely, or is this my coping skills? Because that's how fluid it was. Like that's how entrenched it was in my life. So I just really think about that all the time. Like people who get upset in traffic, I'm like, oh yeah, oh, come on. Like
my ex and I used to get in fights over that all the time, because first of all, when I started working from home, I didn't have to travel all that much anymore. So I wasn't getting stuck in twice daily commutes for hours with angry drivers. And I was able to get some distance from it. And then I just, the few times a week that I would hit the road when I left my home office, it was kind of like, well, I know somebody's going to cut me off anyway. I might as well leave the space. Right. And it really does. It's not costing me more than 5 seconds to let that person in front of me. And I felt my shoulders descend from around my ears, and then suddenly going places wasn't as stressful anymore. And it was funny because he was a very aggressive driver, and like he would get mad at me if I wasn't honking at someone to move because they spent too long at the light. And I was like, oh my gosh, I am not going to remember this in 5 hours or 5 years. So I don't care to expend this level of energy on that. But it was really important to him to teach other people how to do it right. And I was like, all they see is an asshole that's honking at them. And I'm going to do my best. And I'm not preaching that he was right or I'm right or anything like that. It was two different perspectives.
But you're sort of right. Yeah.
But my perspective is similarly in line with yours. It's like, what if they just got a really awful text and they happened to see it right as the light turned and like they're stunned momentarily? What if I am just making somebody's horrible day the worst? Right. And like, I don't want to be that person. I've said that on the show before too. I don't want to be the reason somebody gives up on themselves. I'm going to do my best to never be that person. And I think that comes with a lot of responsibility to monitor my energy, monitor my interpretation, ask, how could this be not what I think it is? How might this situation be playing out on their ends to where everything they're doing makes perfect sense to them? And I'm just missing a critical piece of the puzzle. So like, I love that question. And, that's interesting because you mentioned, and rest in peace, funerals are hard.
I know. I think he was like the best brother because he never fought with anybody. He was like the Bruce Springsteen of our family. Like I always think like no one has ever said Bruce Springsteen is such an asshole. Like no one has ever said that, but he was just, and we did not make it easy. There were 5 girls in that family.
Oh my gosh.
It was intense. Like 5 girls, 4 boys. Yeah, it really was. And you really did have to sort of figure out like, and what's really interesting is all of us are either like marketers, entrepreneurs. My one brother is a professor, which is really marketing because you're selling like a concept. It's really interesting how we are all in like sales and marketing professions, because I think in the context of a big family, you have to grow up that way. So yeah, it was just like a really huge, I miss him, Jimmy.
All right, yeah. Jimmy, we're sending all of the love into the universe.
Yes,
your spirit is with us today. And I thought it was interesting that you mentioned grief, and I'm going to kind of transition into a similar related grief because you talked about getting let go of the job from the job. And we talked about like a client parting of ways that wasn't as pleasant as it could be before we started recording too. And I think that's another kind of grief that we don't really address in the business world. And that is when you are devastated by an unexpected firing, by a client that you loved working with, suddenly having something go wrong and they take it out on you and it just hurts. And then we feel like we have to go on business as usual and just tough it out. And we don't give ourselves that time to grieve. I don't know. It's so interesting to me that that's a stigma.
Oh yeah, totally. And it's so when we were talking before the show, I was just saying for the very first time I got fired by a client. So I can't say it's the first time I ever got fired because we all know I got fired before. But I was really sort of surprised about it. And one of the things that I really thought about was I used to be such a fighter, and I would have really tried to defend myself or tried to get them to see things from my perspective. Like, don't they see how I remember when I got fired from my job, it was a really similar feeling where I was like, oh my gosh, don't they see this part of me inside that is so earnest on doing like, I just want to do a good job for them. I want them to produce something that works, that helps. Like that really is my motivation. And it's so odd when somebody just does not see that or acknowledge that, and demanding that somebody sees that and acknowledges that isn't the way for them to see it. And so where these clients were, I just thought, wow, they are literally like a full glass of water, right? Like they're at the rim. So if I'm trying to put in, oh, here's reason, or here's how things really work with, when you work with a creative consultant, they weren't going to take any of that in. And I honestly know that I have nothing, like I was actually pretty surprised at how calm I was. I did defend myself a couple of times when things crossed the line from being professional to very personal, where I was like, you don't need to go there. Your point, I said, believe me, your point's been made. But I knew that I had nothing to defend because I didn't do anything wrong. And I just remember thinking, it's not even worth the fight. Like, so for someone who was such a fighter and so willing to take up the fight, I just thought, oh, this isn't even worth it, because it's not going to be satisfactory. And it's really going to cause more angst and more sadness to me. And anger, right behind resentment, anger, I just think is one of those also, like, it's like messy. It gets in all between the cracks. And for someone who used to, like, I could get very angry. I'm like, it's just not worth it. So I just really let them go. But it hurts, like, as we're unwinding from the engagement, which is going to end on Friday, which I'm so happy for. There's a part of me that still wants that comeuppance, like to say that one thing that makes them feel like all of a sudden, like the clouds part and the sun starts shining and they're just like, oh my gosh, like, you know what? She was a good person after all. And I just thought that's never going to happen, so I'm not going to try to, anytime I've gotten into like the proverbial trouble, it's when I'm trying desperately to get someone to see things from my perspective and they don't want to. It would be like it would be the same difference. There's so much like political animosity. If you were like on one side of the coin or the other and you were trying to get someone to see things your way, how futile is that? Like it just makes no sense. And there's just so much damage that happens in trying to do that. So I was really actually pretty proud of myself to say, I read somewhere like in my defenselessness is my strength. And now it's like, I'm very quiet. I'm responsive. I'm courteous, but I'm a half of what I would be like, which is normally like, I'm a lover, not a fighter anymore. And so I'm not loving on them, but I know that I'm doing everything that we agreed to, and I'm protecting my business.
Yes.
Too,
and
which is
your
huge.
mental state too.
For
which your
real.
business depends on. Like,
Yes.
I think that's funny because there's a lot of, especially since this society really kind of glorifies people losing their shit over stupid things. And yes, if you lose your shit over stupid things, I'm going to say that it is stupid because half of these things aren't worth your energy. And then you're out there looking like a jerk on the internet because people are like, why on earth are you destroying a Jack in the Box because they forgot mayonnaise? Like, what is happening? Why can't you control yourself? And I will say that,
True, yeah.
You said that, you grew up a fighter too. I grew up a fighter and I developed a pretty devious style, which is I knew how to poke somebody until they went over the edge. And I got a lot of glee in keeping myself calm. And I'm like laughing too. Like I like making you mad. And if you're going to lose your shit, I'm just going to keep pushing until you do. And then you look crazy. And people are going like, what's wrong? So I know, I'm aware of that pattern of manipulation in myself and I try to watch it, but I still have a sense of humor when things get rough and I keep calm by nature.
I used to set off these time release bombs, what I call them, which is I would say something in a really innocent, not yelling or shouting way that I knew like 4 days later, somebody would sit there and just be like, oh, hold on a second. Like I was very good at that.
But I think the brilliant thing that you said that I just want to like circle back and highlight was that metaphor about the full glass.
Yeah.
You just can't pour any more into that glass. It is not physically possible until the glass gets empty. So continuing to push and fight and try and prove like it's just a futile effort. It's like trying to push water up a hill. It's just not going to happen. So you have to give that up.
Especially when it got like it turned and it really did like it definitely crossed the line. And you can have like, I would love to say I have a 100% success rate, with every single thing that I do, but I don't. I have I have a great track record. I have lots of returning clients, people I've worked with since the first day, like I opened my doors for business. And so I have a lot to be proud of too. So it's also, what do I want to feed in my business? Like, do I want to feed the handful of clients that were difficult to work with, where you unwind from the engagement and that you're like, I remember the day when I was working with a really difficult client who was just a toxic human being. And I was so triggered like I was when I worked corporately. And I remember thinking, oh, hold on a second. I never have to work with this person again.
Yes.
Like I do not. And I just remember thinking having your own business is the best.
Yes. That's why I built my own business. I don't have to work on things I don't like working on. And I don't have to talk to people I don't like talking to. It's the best.
Yes. Like I remember thinking I used to do these marketing audits, and because so many people don't pay attention to their marketing, pay a little attention to your marketing. If you find really like people think like, oh, I'm a genius. And I'm like, no, I just pay attention. Like I just have these metrics, but I hate pulling together reports. Like Excel. Same. No, if I could do like some sort of like data stuff in PowerPoint or InDesign, like that is way more my speed. But I was like, I hated pulling them together, but there was like a lot of value in them. Right. So I'm also like I'm still a girl from Toledo, Ohio. So I still have this pragmatic side to what I do. And I just remember thinking, oh my God, I never have to do one of those goddamn marketing reports ever again. And I was just like, this is the best day of my life. Yeah. I'm just like, I'm not doing anything. It's like becoming your own, like moving out of your parents' house and you're like, I don't like cooked carrots. Although I don't know how I didn't like them as a kid. They're delicious now. But I was like, I'm never going to eat that ever again. And
I hated strawberries growing up, but now I love them.
You did? Oh my God. Those are my favorite food.
Oh man. And it's funny too, because we talked a little bit about, a lot of people kind of diminish it, I think, a little bit by calling it taking the high road, as if you're suffering somehow by letting them stew in their stuff, but not saying what you needed to say. And I don't think that there's anything wrong with taking the high road. It doesn't mean I'm going to let myself be walked on. One of my favorite things to tell my coaching students is do no harm, but take no shit. And make no mistake, none of my clients think that they can call me names or say rude things to me, because I give everybody one chance. And it is usually with a lot of love, like, okay, it seems like tensions are high right now. Maybe something's going on, or, something happened that I'm not aware of. This language cannot continue.
Right.
So let's pause and take a deep breath. If we can continue it now, great. If we need to continue this call later, great. Like, let's go take some space and recenter and get back on this in a productive manner. But make no mistake, if that language repeats, I will hang up on you instantly, and we will talk tomorrow.
Well, I liked what you were saying just now. Like, I am not going to let you walk all over me. And if you really think about this idea of the high road, you can't walk on somebody who's on the high road.
Yep.
Like I just literally have this visual in my mind that like the sidewalk lifting off the ground and that person is stomping in the mud. And you're like, I'm up here again, putting yourself in that role of observer, and then forgiving people for just being who, forgiving people, forgiving me. Like, I don't know, like maybe giving my time, like, I know I'm going to look for the meaning in this. One of the things I did realize is that I always, like, if I really like my clients, I'll always like do stuff that's in addition to the scope, and I won't charge them for it. And I thought, one of these days, like, someone's going to really like, you're going to absolutely devalue what you're doing. And I thought, I am devalued. Like, in this situation, I absolutely devalued what I was doing because I threw in a lot of stuff for free too. And so that, like, there are some really good learning lessons that come from this. Like, I have fired, like, I've broken up. I don't want to say fired because that's such like a hostile word, but I have broken up with 2 clients who just were not great people to work with. One actually had questionable business ethics. And I was just like, I just do not want to be associated with this person. And I remember the first time I did it, I was looking over like my terms and conditions and my contract, and they were really clever and cute and really short. And I thought, I am 1000% exposed. And so I got really serious about making sure that my contract protects me. And in this situation, I was able to refer to my contract. I mean, some of the things that were said were pretty extreme. And I'm just like, no, please refer back to the approved proposal, So it was very powerful. And again, it distances you from any emotion when you have this like document between you. But that was also like a hard lesson learned too. So
I find that funny because that's something that I've seen with earlier stage entrepreneurs, especially like in the freelance and the creative industries, like the resistance to contracts. And then also the simultaneous belief that contracts are some sort of magic shields that you can just like, when you enable the contract, it makes them magically bend to your will. And I'm like, not without lawyers and money and a whole lot of time and aggravation. And that is, by the way, the nuclear option, to take someone to court to try and force them to do something. So you have a good contract in place and you hope you never have to use it. That's the key here. Like, you get into business with people you don't think you're going to have to take to court. And and also like feeling that if they just got the perfect wording in the contracts, that like they would protect themselves. Guys, those of us that have great contracts messed up a lot and went, okay, well, that needs to be amended. That needs to be part of my working process. I never want to work with somebody like them again. How do I filter them out at the beginning? It's all a learning process. It's all
exactly.
Iteration.
One of my favorite things that I put into my contract was inspired by my friend who I told you about earlier, which is she was 18 months ahead, and she's they have a branding agency. So they're all design. And it's interesting how some clients will just go dark on you all of a sudden. It was very interesting to me is how a lot of times, right, like you work so really closely with someone and you do their website and you're about to launch their website and they get so freaked out by it. They literally don't return your calls for like weeks. And you're just like, wait, like we're so ready to do this. And there's just something about sort of staking a claim with something new and big that just must be so intimidating for people. But I put a restart fee in so there's language in my contract. So if you have freelancers, put this in your contract because it's such a brilliant ad, which is because I have a good methodology for following up with people. And so my language is basically like, if I follow up with you and the project goes dormant for 30 days, revving back up is subject to it's a percentage of I used to have a flat amount. And then I was like, no, I'm going to put in like a percentage of the project fee. And one of the things that's so beautiful about it is when I really don't hear from somebody, I don't invoke it. Like, I think I've charged it once, but I could say, hey, there's this restart fee. And I want to say, like, if I don't hear from you by this date, I have no choice but to invoke this. And I will get I can almost go like 3, 2, 1.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I'm here. It's
I put all that into my contracts too, like a kill fee, because sometimes businesses change direction in the middle of the project, but that doesn't mean that I don't deserve to get paid for what I've dedicated to this.
Yes,
so like at certain milestones, there are certain payments due. And of course, it's at my discretion to award them more or hold the line. But like I have those terms in there so that it's easier to say, like, the agreement that you signed. And I don't just, and this is key too, I think, to people that are newer to business, I don't just give them a contract and then expect them 3 months later to remember what the hell they signed. Do you remember what you signed in the last like Apple update agreements? I don't think so.
I've never even read it.
So every
I'm surprised at how many people, I'm surprised at the number of people who read my contracts, and a huge question that they have is who owns what.
Mm-hmm.
And they own like the final finished materials, but I own like all the raw files. I own anything. I work with a ton of apartment developers. So we'll go through like branding and naming. And so we'll produce names and logos and things like that. And that they think, oh, like one of my clients was like, oh, I'm taking these names that we didn't use in your presentation and I'm using them on these other properties. And I'm like, no. And they go into, it's not like we recycle. Sometimes we do, but we always say that they go into the orphanage, like the name or logo orphanage. But sometimes you do pull them out because they're like a really perfect fit for another client. It just wasn't right for that one client. But it's that's what people pay attention to most, which is like, what does this mean? Like, what does it mean? Do you own? And I'm like, it means I'm never going to give you the Illustrator files. So you can take this, and it means like you're going to have to call me to do your business cards for the rest of your life.
Well, I think it's interesting too. Like we talked about kill fees and we talked about, the magic contract language, but I treat this like gentle parenting. So I reinforce the stages of every agreement at every stage, and I don't do it with frustration or accusation. It's all right. Okay, here is the first draft of the copy. If you remember, the process is this. You have 14 days to give me your feedback. I know it's kind of a tight turnaround, so you have to let me know if you need more time. But if I don't hear from you in 2 weeks, this is considered finalized. And if you need further edits, that's a separate project fee.
Wow, you give people I give people 3 days. They're so nice. Like, I'm like, let's keep this moving, people. Yeah, like that's, I mean, I bet that you do much different kind of cut, but I usually... But I'll be good about like review rounds, like, because you just don't want people to, because people have to have that, your clients have to have that kind of discipline on the other side too. Like,
you don't want things to languish, and you especially don't want to get into agreements where your final payment is dependent upon their approval, and then they drag out approval for 6 months.
Right.
That's
or
not
they go
fair.
through 11 rounds of revisions.
Yeah.
It's like there has to be a way to do. Yeah. So I do that same thing that I'm like, here's your website. Remember, every page has 2 review rounds. And so the first round is substantial. The second one is validating that all the things are, and then it's going to be your final comments or approval. And anything above and beyond that is like, it is really nice when people push back on that, because you can say, no, it's right here. So I always give 2 revision. How many revision rounds do you give? You probably give.
It's the same structure. And it works out the same thing too. Like the first round is for substantive. So if we missed the mark, if we misunderstood a story, if the hook isn't resonating, if something changed in the business, round 1 revisions is where the rewrite happens. A ground up rewrite can happen in round 1. Round 2 is to ensure we caught all the revisions. This makes sense. This looks good. Oh, typo here. Oh, misspelled word there. Something like that. By round 3, this thing should be close to perfect. And did a link break? Did something happen? Oh, that thing got nudged out of place in the design.
Right.
But like final checks are final checks. And we are not rewriting in round 3. We're not.
No.
Oh my gosh. I feel like I could rant with you all day. I think we just have to agree on doing a part 2, because I have so many other things that I want to talk to you about on this list that we didn't get to. But for now, I want you to tell us more about your business and tell us where we can find you online.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much. So if you are an entrepreneur or someone, entrepreneur, I wish we could come up with another word, because talk about typos. I misspell that word every single time I write it the first time. I'm just like, how is this the word for people who want to have a purpose-filled business? But I really am passionate about helping new entrepreneurs understand and know that there's an order to marketing operations. So I write emails every week. I do Facebook Lives. I have a great ultimate marketing checklist that you can have access to everything all on my website at heyheathercampbell.com. And the way that I describe this is like there are 6 stages, really 8, but like 6 core stages that every business must know to be successful in marketing. Like this is not like the Heather Campbell way of doing things or the Angie Coley way of doing things. Or this system. This is just like reflecting the laws of marketing. This is how it's done. How there's not more people out there telling people like this. This is why when you know somebody who hires a marketing professional, they see a lift in polish and performance. It's because there's a system that we follow. And if you talk with any marketer, they're going to be like, they might do things slightly differently. Like I know there's a brander who we know, Kathleen, who's like this amazing brander, and she does stuff in a slightly different order than I do, but it doesn't matter. Like she has distinct steps. I have distinct steps. So it's like having a ladder with 6 rungs to get up to the roof of a building to say, hey, everyone, I'm open for business. And entrepreneurs are just like, I'm just going to take off the first 4 rungs. And so like you might be able to jump up on that 5th rung and you might be able to get to that roof, but not without a whole lot of exertion, struggle, trial and error. You're probably going to fall off and then like figure out, how do I do this again? Where it's so much easier if it's just like boom, 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 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
Exactly.
So
we want to move at warp speed, but just take it one step at a time. It goes so much faster.
A tiny bit. Like the 2 words that I dislike most that have been commandeered into something positive in the entrepreneurial community are the words hustle and hack. And if you really look at both of those words in the dictionary, they're not positive in any way. Like hustle, nobody wants to be hustled. And to me, hustle implies haste, where it doesn't take, like people think like, oh, if I spend time doing like branding research, which I call branding me search, because you want it to be about you. Like, I know it's like cute, right? And it rhymes. It's like, it doesn't take months. It literally takes a weekend of just spending, like take 48 hours. We were just talking about how 48 hours is not that big in the whole scheme of things.
Yep.
It's not even the full part of the week. Like it honestly is just 2 out of 7 days. If you just spend a little bit of time and bring intention into these foundational pieces, which is your brand, how you show up, which is not your logo, it's not your story.
No.
Those things are hugely important, but it's neither of those things. And then your customers, and then matching your offer to what your customers want and need, and who you want to work with. Like, why are we all of a sudden like indiscriminate? Like, I'll work with anyone. It's like, no, you would not have a party and just let anyone come into your house. Like, I always think about like what customers, who are the people you want to come into your house and that are going to make it into your kitchen, the best room in the house at any party. And so I am so passionate about teaching what I know, and there's nobody out there doing it. I actually just did a Google search for like grow my brand, and it returned 808 million results.
Wow.
And there's so much hype out there, and the hype machine doesn't want you to know. Like those professional marketers who make 7 figures, who tell you, do this one thing right now, and they act like, do this one thing and you're going to get 100,000 followers. No, that never works. And that person understands the marketing operations. That's why they are a 7-figure business. So it's not, they've
done all the foundation work and then accelerated it with the one tactic that they are teaching.
Yes.
That's the thing we miss most of the time.
And so many of them are one-hit wonders too. They figured something out that works only for their business, and they're like, oh, this is great. And I'm not saying that everyone out there is a gimmick, because that's not the case at all. But there's a lot of really not, I would say, self-proclaimed experts who really do not have a lot of experience outside of their own business. And those are the kind of people that you definitely want to take with a grain of salt. And they're the ones who are spending so much money on advertising to get in front of you, to prey on your insecurities, to tell you like, this is the one tactic, and people get so caught up in the tactics, they forget like you have to have a strategy. Otherwise, tactics end up being like going to the grocery store and you have no idea what you're going to have for dinner, and you come home. Like this just happened to me last week.
$500 cart.
Oh my God. Like I brought home sushi and malted milk balls. And then when I finally decided what I was going to make for dinner, chicken piccata, I came home and I forgot lemons and capers, which are like the two key ingredients. Like I seriously could have cried because I was at the grocery store for like 50 minutes. I probably spent $75 more than if I just went in with purpose and intention and said, I'm going to get chicken piccata. I'm going to go boom, boom, boom. I'd be out of there with nothing extra. Maybe the malted milk balls. That is my weakness. Like I do love those guys.
The funny thing is the tactics all work. So I hate when they're like, this is the one thing. They all work. They all work. Which one works for your business and your people? That's the thing that we're finding out that the foundation will get you to. So, this is so great.
Oh my God. Yes. And if you don't know who you are or who your people are, that's where the overwhelm. Like I would say, marketing is not rocket science. It literally requires intention, consistency, and engagement. That's it. That's it.
Yep. Oh, so great. So wonderful.
Oh my God. I am hugging you like so hard virtually through our Zoom feed.
This is so great. I wanted it to be like the first 2-hour episode. If I didn't have to jump onto another one soon, we would just keep going. But we're going to book another two.
Going with you.
Oh, I know.
The energy is so good.
We're going to book a number 2. We're going to have that one go out. I'm going to make sure that they have
a number. Let's not call it a number 2.
A number 2, a part 2.
A part 2. Yeah.
I didn't even hear myself saying it. It's been such a long day. But I'll make sure they have clickable links in the show notes. And I hope everybody comes to you for your branding wizardry. Thank you so much for being on the show. It was lovely to see you again.
Oh my gosh. I know. I wish we could do this every Wednesday afternoon. It was so fun. Thank you so much for all you're doing and sharing your work and your story too, and giving people permission to kick ass. Yes. I love the name of this webinar. I love this name of this podcast. I hope your person can edit that out. I just think that what you're doing is so important because when we present ourselves, especially in social media, people think like, oh, they have it completely together. And yeah, I mean, I like to think that I do, but I'm hardly like a person who's impervious to crazy things happening, getting fired from jobs, getting finger in traffic, those kinds of things too. We're all, at the end of the day, we're all human beings.
None of us has it together.
Not one of us.
It's fine. It's all good. Thank you so much for being on the show, and we're going to talk soon.
Thank you, honey.
So that is it. Another awesome episode of Permission to Kick Ass on the books. If you want to know more about the show, if you want to know more about me, Angie Coley, and the mission I'm on to help entrepreneurs punch fear in the face and do big, bold things, then head on over to permissiontokickass.com. That is all one word together, permissiontokickass.com. Make sure to sign up for my email list so that you know whenever there's a hot, fresh, and ready podcast episode out for you. And also on Mondays, I like to send out a little newsletter called Kick Monday's Ass. I'm sure you're totally surprised by that. So thank you for being here with me today. I'm Angie Coley. Make sure that you share this with a friend that needs to hear this message today. Like it, share it, comment wherever you're listening to this today, and let's go kick some ass.